Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Fédération of the Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and director of telescopefilm.com, which is a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year live French, learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a short video. I will put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. So next Monday, we will meet on Monday, September 22nd. We'll be talking about When Fall is Coming, directed by François Ozon and starring Hélène Vincent, Josiane Barrasco, and Ludivine Sagnier. He is one of my own personal favorite filmmakers, and I think this film is him at the top of his game, so I'm looking forward to that. But our film for today is Last Summer, directed by Catherine Breillat. Lots to talk about there. Before we get started, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves muted when you are not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. It's in the reaction section, or you're always welcome to put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom, then sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our facilitator, who is also the chief film critic for Variety, Peter Debruge. I'll hand things over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Justine. Welcome. It's always great to see, by this point, some longtime familiar faces back every month. Always exciting when new people are joining us. So whichever category you fall into, welcome back. I think we've kind of been on a streak here, just reminding ourselves that French cinema often gives us these really meaty, topical stories to sort of sink our teeth into, where, I sometimes feel it's a little bereft of that at the box office for kind of mainstream American cinema. I hope that you're finding that to be the case too with films like, this next month's Ozon film, the last month's Stranger by the Lake. I think that maybe tested our boundaries a little bit, but of course, this is another, I guess, sexually provocative film from a director, Catherine Breillat, who's really known for that. I mean, that's kind of been her focus throughout her career, is dealing with these frank depictions of human sexuality, often being open to considering kind of that sexuality begins before maybe what we would consider the age of consent or things like that, and how we deal with that. Like, I think her best film is one called Fat Girl, which is, I don't know how you watch the film. I'm guessing a lot of you probably saw it on the Criterion channel, where, they have distribution rights and they're streaming it. Fat Girl is another film of theirs, but that's a movie about like two sisters, one who's just kind of like starting to be on the cusp of her sexuality, and the films like that. And let me remind myself of some of the early titles, like 36 Fillettes was another that kind of deals dirty like an angel. These early films are kind of about female sexuality, often at kind of a young or precocious period in people's lives. And And then for complicated reasons, Catherine Breillat's career kind of dwindled down or petered out to the point that I was starting to think we would not hear from her again. And so when this movie showed up a few years ago, was it 3 years ago? 2 years ago, 2023, at the Cannes Film Festival and competition. It was really both welcome to have a return from Breillat at such a high profile, but also if you know her work, this is really something that's a return to form. This is what she does so well, the kind of nuances that this movie presents, the kind of shades of gray, the unflinching aspect, the idea that she's not making things necessarily more palatable for us, but really kind of putting us in confrontation with a tricky personality and some really controversial decisions on the part of Lea Drucker's character, etc. Interestingly enough, I don't know how many of you saw from the same edition of the Cannes Film Festival, the movie May December that Todd Haynes made. It's as that title suggests, it's also a kind of a love story between, in that case, a teenage boy and a woman who kind of works at the kid's school, played by Julianne Moore. And I don't want to get distracted by talking about another film, but it's kind of interesting if you haven't seen that movie, which I'm pretty sure is streaming on Netflix. You might be interested to recreate the kind of double bill that a lot of us experienced at Cannes, because there are ways in which the two movies kind of play off of each other thematically. So maybe in a further viewing, kind of recipe, you can make a note of May, December. But here, because the movie is, so rich and so potentially, I don't know if triggering is the right word, but certainly something that, can push our buttons. That's probably, from my generation, maybe more the way we would describe these things. It's like, this is meant to sort of like spark reactions in people. I almost want to sort of feel people out and see if some of you want to share your reaction to the film, kind of unaffected by anything more I might say, and we can kind of hear those and we can kind of turn that into a conversation. Is anybody kind of feeling motivated enough to maybe throw out their reaction to the movie? I'd also be curious, when we hear from you, if this is your first encounter with Breillat's films or not, because I do think if you come to it with the artist in mind and kind of a familiarity with her work, you may be prepared for some of the things that are otherwise rather shocking about the movie. But okay, now's the moment where you have the chance to raise your hands or speak up if you're courageous enough to kind of like stick your neck out first. I promise I don't bite. Anybody? Okay, I mean, I can keep us going kind of like with some direct questions, but just wanted to see, I'm so curious, like this was a film that was so interesting to discuss fresh out of seeing it at the Cannes Film Festival, and people really came to it with so many different readings. Cecile has raised her hand. I'd love to I'd love to hear from you guys before, and if we've got a few people. So Cecile, if you want to unmute, we'll hear from you, and then Leslie, I saw that you also will come to you next.
Hi. Yes, this is my first experience with her films. I'm not a real experienced film watcher. But I loved the film. I thought it was beautifully filmed, actually. It was just lovely to look at. Uh, but the ending just threw me for a loop.
We will definitely get to the ending, and I think it's designed to really whatever sense of kind of stability we might have, or is definitely kind of like knocked sideways by that scene. So we'll come back to it, but thanks for bringing that up. Leslie, go ahead.
So I'm also have not
New to-
experienced her films. I have to say some of the message one might think of it conveying was disturbing in the sense that I'm a college professor, we tell students at college that if one person says no, then you should stop. And that clearly here it was like one person says no, but then really seems to like it. So that seems awkward to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's really fascinating how, if what we're talking there is about consent in particular, that is not mine, by the way. That's my cat Popeye, who may make some other cameo appearances during our conversation. He's developed a real affinity for Zoom calls. But consent is really fascinating to me because I think that young people, college-age people, high school-aged people are really having that notion communicated to them in a healthy and way here in the States. It's also complicating things about just sexuality is often, not as kind of like premeditated or as kind of diplomatic maybe as we would like for it to be in a lot of situations. And so there are lots of situations, where ambiguities arise and things like that. This is definitely a film in which mixed messages are being sent, kind of through it, and we can kind of look at certain scenes or try and make sense of what Catherine Breillat may be saying. I do think that she is not a moralistic filmmaker. And so I think one of the things that is very shocking about this movie, and maybe it is kind of a preview of what we might say about the ending, is that she doesn't punish people for what we might all agree are unambiguously wrong decisions, or even borderline evil decisions in some cases, like I noticed on the Criterion channel, there's like a 4-minute kind of introduction to the film with John Waters. You guys know John Waters probably by reputation. He's, the kind of provocateur who did Pink Flamingos and things like that. And he likes to kind of stir things up. And so I kind of expected, if he was talking about this movie and a filmmaker he really admires, that he would maybe be, kind of laughing at what he was seeing, but he seemed shocked. And to imagine what shocks John Waters, and he uses the word pernicious to describe the behavior. And I think that's, it's a great one. Like, what she starts to do when she starts to cover up becomes, quite pernicious. So right now we're just kind of like surfacing some of the things that we can come back to. So thank you for bringing that up. As a college professor, you're definitely kind of dealing with young people whose sexuality is still kind of in formation. And here we're rewinding even a couple years younger. Popeye has some thoughts, but I don't understand him. So I'm going to mute my side and let Sharif and Zainab weigh in here next.
I have a comment to what Cecile said about the ending. It seems that this movie is based on a Danish movie made only 3 or 4 years before that by Marit Tuchi. And the major change was the ending. So basing a movie on a relatively recent movie and then changing only the end, that means that the filmmaker want to send a message. She didn't like the ending of the Danish movie, and then she ended the movie the way she thinks that this is the right thing to do, this ambiguous way, and turning the character from somebody whom you can root for to somebody you cannot understand. Why is she doing that?
Yeah, I That's an excellent analysis, especially so we can look at this phenomenon that happens certainly with international cinema and how it's not uncommon that a movie made in one language or culture will be kind of translated to another. We don't tend to see it so often kind of into French. It happens quite a lot when French movies kind of get Hollywoodized or, kind of like remade in other countries. Even comedies sometimes, like some of Danny Boon's movies, Bienvenue chez les Ch'tis has been remade in many languages. But here it suggests that Catherine Breillat, who had not made a movie for 10 years prior to this one, had, to Justine's point in chat, she mentions Queen of Hearts, which is the name of the Danish film. If you're interested in seeing it, it might be interesting, just as you might compare it to May, December. It's probably very interesting to compare what was Catherine Breillat wanting to do or say differently with this, especially she's the one who kind of wrote the screenplay for this. But I remember in our review, the Variety review of Queen of Hearts, the critic, my colleague Guy Lodge, kind of like made a statement about how like you can kind of imagine the Hollywood remake of this movie with like Robin Wright Penn as the character that Léa Drucker plays. And interestingly enough, it gets remade in France, but it gets remade by one of the, I think we could call her one of the edgiest directors there is in the world. It reminds me a little bit of Oshima, who was also quite provocative in Japan years ago within the realm of the senses and movies like that. This is someone who's really fearless in terms of confronting these things. And we'll hear from a couple more people, but I think we can probably get to the ending before the end of our session, since that's definitely an interesting point to unpack here. Okay, so great points, Sharif, thank you. Let's hear from Jeanne next.
Hi, yeah, I had a thought that when she's telling him she'd had to have an abortion when she was quite young, that maybe she had been seduced by an older man and had an affair, and that this was like, because there were times where she was just completely zoning out, and it seemed like she was kind of going back and reliving this experience that had happened to her when she was young. And I don't know, I just had that thought. I don't know if anybody else
It's interesting. I mean, in some ways it's kind of the Lolita theory, like there's not an actual theory, but what I mean, like that character Humbert in Nabokov's book is chasing some kind of young sexual formative crush, maybe not even sexual, but romantic or something. Like, in Lolita, he's kind of trying to recreate some unrequited or lost connection to someone that age. Now, that's a story of pedophilia, and that's the mindset of a pedophile, by which I'm only distinguishing that, like almost like someone who's like what's the word when you, not chronic, but like when you're kind of serially seeking the same experience. Here I think the movie makes quite clear, this is not to contradict anything that you're intuiting, Jean, but I think it's very interesting that Breillat includes this lovemaking scene between Léa Drucker's character and her husband, where he's not what many people would recognize as sexy. If you put him and, the teenage boy side by side and force someone to choose, it might be like, well, there's an obvious reason I can't choose the teenage boy, but I don't really want what's behind door number 2 in this case. And she makes the kind of like a reassuring comment to her husband about like, I'm a gerontophile, which I think I've heard that word a couple times in my life, but it's not one that comes up in movies very often, where and she's meaning it a little bit jokingly because they're peers, he's not like elderly relative to her, but it communicates to us that that's a genuine. She has not done what Humbert does in Lolita, which is he marries the mom, because he's targeted the daughter, and like it's sort of, he's referring throughout the novel to the mom as like that cow, and like in a really disrespectful way, it's like where he's kind of really doing something predatory. It's really intriguing to me the way that this it's really interesting to me the way that someone's there we go. It's kind of slow build.
Peter, you're muted now.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muting the person who was on the phone.
I think we muted simultaneously, so everybody else, you are muted, so please
Okay.
unmute when you want to speak.
So I was just to sort of wrap up my ramble. It's like I think it's very interesting that, like, if you were doing a traditional screenplay and this was a movie that was specifically kind of plot-wise about just the affair, it probably would enter into the movie earlier than it does. It's like on page 20 or whatever it is, and this kind of takes a little bit longer to show this strange dynamic that seems to start with her really feeling antagonized by the stepson who doesn't accept her, and feeling, it seems like step by step, that she's making progress with him, and how that takes a kind of unexpected and dangerous turn later on. Psychologically, I think it's, quite an interesting distinction from a movie that's specifically about pedophiles. And of course, in addition to her being established as a gerontophile, she's introduced as someone who's an advocate for the well-being of young people. The ultimate irony here. Okay, so enough from me. Alan, let's hear from you.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that it's my first time I watched this lady director, and I was very disturbed by the scene where the sister finds her in the act with the guy. I found it very disturbing. It seems that she was not keeping it all that careful.
Yeah, I mean that's a really effective scene, I think, and there's one of the big suspense elements of this movie that is itself pernicious, if you think about this, is we are identifying with this character for a time, and we are afraid on her behalf that she may be discovered, even though we should probably be calling the police on her or something. You know what I mean? Like what I guess I'm saying is the movie asks us to identify with her especially, but also with the other characters. And in that moment, we keep seeing the boy who doesn't seem to have the same stakes, by which I mean, like, if he's discovered, it might actually be bragging rights, or like he's playing with his power, his, kind of like his sexual power, his, his independence from his parents. This may partly be some kind of, subconscious thing that he's doing against his father, all these kind of things. And but on her part, she both wants it to not be discovered, but I think it's pretty clear that she recognizes that what happened was wrong and she doesn't want to repeat it. So it's like, he keeps kind of initiating in these different things. So it's a very stressful scene, I think, is what you're picking up on, right? All right, Ivan, let's hear from you. You're on mute still, though, if you could unclick.
Yeah, I think you actually already touched on that just with a couple of sentences before, but I think that we have to look at her. We can't forget that what her profession is exactly, and how she's a lawyer, and she's also taking care of children. I mean, she's how would you say it? She's family lawyer, I guess, and so she really knows every end of it, and she is as interested in helping young people, and she did really want to help him at first. She saw that, well, he had problems, obviously. He hates his father, And she wanted to rectify that situation. And while doing that, she got seduced by him with the tattoos and with the arm. And he, I mean, he was very clever and very sweet and in a way almost innocent, but we wonder if he really knew exactly what he was doing. Was he want to get back at his father? But then as she did get seduced, I think she really liked that relationship. She was really attracted to him, flattered and probably very satisfied in how he helped her sexually. And then at the end, I mean, when it came to the point, she was then also hard and ruthless. I mean, she would just, you know, sell him down the river. And she would go all the way to save herself. So she was very, very hard. And the way, so we were very surprised. And then the way the boy reacted at the end. So he was also probably he was in love with her. And it was a mixture between love to a mother and love to an older woman and love to sex. So that dynamic, I think, played into the game.
You've picked up on a lot of really interesting nuances here. I mean, Renee, I know that you've seen the original, and this seems like the perfect time to kind of call on you to talk about a few of these elements, because like here, you might help us understand whether Breya is doing anything differently from that version. And also you're familiar, I guess, with the difference in the ending. So I'd love to have you weigh in.
Well, thank you, Peter. Yeah, I took the liberty of taking some extra time today to watch Queen of Hearts, which is a Danish film, and I can't pronounce the director's name, but I think it's already been mentioned. But it's a very different film, and personally, I think that obviously, I mean, in every way, it's Danish. Everything from the furniture to the clothes to the way people speak to each other, everything is different in that respect. But this is basic. Catherine Breillat's film is a remake, but I think Catherine Breillat's film is a lot more accessible, and her take is very different. I mean, I don't think personally that she really cares that Anne is this attorney or is a mother of 2 adopted children. I mean, she is the epitome of female sexuality, and that's, I think, what Breillat is trying to convey. In the other film, it's much more understated, perhaps because it is in a different part of the world. But the director of Queen of Hearts obviously despises Anne. And the ending, and I don't want to give it away, it's surprising, but she doesn't get away with it. You know, in Breillat's film, it's very ambiguous. One of the things that I think is particularly interesting in this film is when I saw the film, I think at the New York Film Festival, but the actor who plays the teenager, Samuel Kircher, who is the baby brother of Paul Kircher, who we saw in Animal Kingdom, and he's a superstar. This was.
Did you know this, Renee? I only learned it when researching the movie. Not only is he the younger brother of the Animal Kingdom star, he's the son of Irene Jacob.
I knew that, but this was his first film. He had never been in another film. So and I heard, I think Catherine.
These 2 young men are quite gifted, you know.
They're like the Schneider brothers. They all are so good looking, and they're just. But this was his first film. Can you imagine playing this role with a director like Catherine Breillat, and watching him and watching his teeth and the way he moves, the evil. So to whoever who just said that he was manipulative, I think in this film versus Queen of Hearts, I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, I know. And then the situation in Queen of Hearts is quite different. The whole sense of evil, and and sexuality is very different in both films. But I think Samuel Kircher carries this film with his, I don't know, his naivete or his good looks, whatever it is. But
I mean, it's really a remarkable performance for any number of levels. I mean, there's this early scene where he appears shirtless, and the way that he's kind of like, I mean, we've all seen it with young people. People do it on Instagram all the time. And when I say young, I don't necessarily mean like underage. It seems to be something where that kind of thing that kicks in with puberty and carries on through maybe one's 20s, where there's a kind of casual exploration, a provocation of how people react to you, a naivete, all of these things mixed in. And, you know, I think we see some moments that are quite affecting in this movie where he's becoming jaded to the way the adult world works. I think that's especially true of the close-up on him, you know, kind of like with, it's almost like, looks like he's bitten into his lip, or there's something kind of, his like puffy lip is kind of unfocused when his father and stepmother are kind of insisting that he admit his lie. And we, of course, know that he's done this thing that's actually quite scary, which is to come forward as a victim and be honest about that. And the world is kind of rejecting his honesty. And you know, like, to me, this is one of those kind of there is no Santa Claus moments. Sorry if any of you still believe in Santa Claus, but like spoiler alert, but like, you know, the world can kind of like, you know, you do the right thing and it can kind of like, you know, reject that thing. And so I think it's interesting to hear analyses of him being manipulative in those things. I think that Catherine Breillat wants that. She doesn't want him to be a clear-cut victim or just someone like, you know, he's complicit in this, but that does not make what she does okay, but it makes the position that they find themselves in so much more complex, because there is more than consent on his part sexually. I mean, he's proactively seeking more of it with her, you know, and so it's not necessarily a situation where like a cougar or a pedophile is kind of like targeting and grooming and the kind of things that we hear and look out for as a society. It's much more like this thing where, what if someone who is precocious and who is clearly already sexually active with multiple young teenage girls in his life, you know, kind of is now using his, you know, kind of seductive power on this woman, who that is a huge no-no for him too, not just because he's underage, but because, you know, she's married to his father and all these kind of things. So I don't think it's meant to necessarily give Leah Drucker's character excuses, but it's definitely meant to put this woman who is quite admirable in the early scenes and who is proactively working on behalf of the welfare of children in this kind of the most difficult moral position someone with her career could find themselves in. Now, I want to keep going down the hands, but I just want to bring up something that I've seen come up as a theme in sort of the discussion here on the side, which is this idea of what the characters have to lose. And I think that that's really important to understanding kind of this really horrible turn that the advocate, the lawyer, takes later on, because she's clearly in kind of a survival or a protection mode for herself. So feel free to kind of, you know, weave that into your answers, but I want to keep going down some of the people who've raised their hands. So Michelle, you're next.
So that's perfect, because that's what I was going to talk about was the whole time I was watching, I was trying to figure out what the director wanted us to learn from it and what she was trying to say. And one of the things that I took away was the secrets that all of the adults kept, because even if he was being manipulative and he was this and that, I read he was 17, which in here is underage and obviously extremely young when compared to 40, 50, whatever. the adults in the situation should have, in my moralistic opinion, been protective of the child versus protective of themselves. And every person, Pierre and her sister, every one of them they were keeping the secret. And there were multiple times where Pierre was shown, like the point where she lied to him and said that the child was a monster, blah, blah, blah. And there's that one scene where he's almost crushing her head, holding her so tight. You don't see her face, you see his face, and he's crying. And it's like, okay, good, you've given me the excuse that I needed to not believe the child, even though he knew, because he also said in an earlier scene that he knew something that he would only know if they had been intimate. So he knew the truth. He needed an excuse to not believe the truth so that he could maintain what he had there, probably because he'd already broken a marriage and a family and he didn't want to do it again. And he was talking about how old he was and all the things. And then the sister, they let us know that the sister, had not the greatest life. And she saw that, she left the party. She said, I'm leaving the party. And then there's that scene in the kitchen where she gets really close to Anne's ear and says, I can't stay mad at you forever. And so she's also keeping a secret, which she knows is wrong. Anne knows is wrong. The father, they all know it. Every adult there knows it, but then chooses to continue to keep that secret. And when I saw the scene of the two parents and the child sitting in the chair, his face at that moment was very much like a child. And he also had a tear. And maybe that's what you were talking about, Peter, where he's realizing, wait, these adults suck. This is not what was supposed to happen after I told the truth. And it's like that sort of loss of innocence when he should have been being protected. So that was one thing I took away, was just the secret keeping and how every one of them knew the truth but chose to lie to themselves, to each other, to whoever.
That all seems to me very accurate to the real world. I mean, like in cases where, I don't know if we should say things like this happen, but rather in cases where, a young person goes to their parents, for help in this, there's often a part of the reaction that can be judgmental towards the child, the victim, that doesn't want to believe it. It's like, I don't want to share particulars from, acquaintances of mine, but I definitely have seen this pattern where, they have been made to feel guilty for any abuse that they experienced. Instead of having advocates or helpers, people in their corner, they instead, kind of like feel more alienated than ever, because the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally and support you. And here, of course, if it's a parent, or a relative, like an authority figure, someone in that kind of like, that sphere that is supposed to be your most immediate protector. So it's like, this is not just a woman in his sphere. It's not like a lawyer that he's been dealing with. It's his, kind of like surrogate mother. And, it just makes the whole dynamic, one in which, we see him act in some pretty inappropriate ways, but I really feel enormous sympathy for the kind of way his world like closes in around him and boxes him out of any options as the movie goes on. That said, I think a few people have brought up, I think Brea, while she depicts that or lets us sense that, is really focused in this movie on honoring female sexuality in a situation in which it's dishonorable, if that's fair to say. It's like we see an attention to this woman's love life, and there's this very interesting but I think defining scene where it's focused on her face and her pleasure in a moment in which it's hard not to feel that this is a totally unacceptable, sex scene. But it's a sex scene in which, like, Catherine Breillat is letting us read to the point that like the sound drops out and she lingers on, this I don't know that it's an orgasmic expression, but it's just one in which we seem to see a kind of fulfillment that she's getting from this. And I think this is all part of the complexity. I don't think it's, meant to suggest approval or anything like that. But I think it's maybe, I would put it this way, it's meant to not discount female sexuality as a force or a power in the world. And, she's kind of doing something that's kind of radical in films of letting us see that. I'd seen a couple of hands that have kind of disappeared. I want to make sure, Mia, I think you raised your hand earlier. Are you okay? Did you still want to, were we taking too long to get to you, or did you, I don't want to
No,
put you on the spot.
So thanks for your time. So I think I agreed with what Michelle really kind of focused in on, and then something else that came to mind for me a little bit after that. I was, at one point in the film, after she had told the boy that she would keep the secret if he would start like getting on board with the family and everything, me as a family person, that being kind of the most important thing in my life, I was really like starting to cheer for this family. He's going to the swimming hole, he's playing with the girls, he's really kind of come around, and I was really starting to cheer for this family. And then for me, yes, the boy, I think, yes, he was manipulative, and I think some damage that had been done to him by the grown-ups was kind of perpetuated by what now this stepmother kind of allowed to happen, which she had control over. I just think that she really kind of came out to be yes, sexuality and women power and all that. I wound up not liking her because
Kind of hard to, right?
yeah, and I
really
don't for
makes it hard
anybody.
to.
Yeah, it really makes you hard to like her because she was this hard charging attorney for these, for these victims, and then she became, a victimizer. I really, really saw her as a villain toward the end. And then what I think the most important thing, because some of the sex scenes, the very first sex scene with her husband, she was going off about the first old guy that she lusted after. And, she was talking about all of that while her husband clearly was trying to be intimate with her. But it seems to me that sex had become, I don't know, a weapon for her, or it was no longer love for her, but just the act of sex and manipulation, and that mental manipulation that she could put on other people, because she clearly had her husband sort of in her clutches, and then this boy, and then whatever had happened to her when she was younger must have been really horrible. But at the very end, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody who needs to go and watch it again, I felt like her poor husband, when she comes back in after she said she called the boy a cab, the man kind of like, he just kind of pulled her in. His eyes were open, so he wasn't still asleep. And he was like, "Oh, who was that?" And I think he had resigned himself to, I love this woman, and I don't care what she is and how she has wrecked my life. I have chosen her over my boy, and I choose her. And he kind of just like welcomed her in. And I think he might have had an inkling of what she had been up to when she had gone out to answer the door.
Yeah.
So she was the villain for me. Sorry.
No, I think by the end, she's kind of getting away with it, and she's destroyed some lives and she's living a lie. It's very hard, I think, to see some of her choices and not any kind of like admiration we had for her early on has been tainted by her choices later on. And the choices motivated, as we've said, by like just fear of losing so much, this family that she's building. What you could even say something as minor as the progress she was making with this boy. Like she almost doesn't want to admit that like this totally erases the significance of any of that. Like whatever confidences she had protecting his secret, now she's betraying it, all this kind of stuff. I also think it's worth mentioning that like if we were to put aside some of the really complex things that just legal, moral, whatever, the incest, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, step incest or whatever, like, you know, within a family. I mean, the world has not been able to forgive Woody Allen for having started a relationship with his above age stepdaughter. And it's just like, there may not be laws that prevent that, but that is clearly against a code of culture or of society that we kind of hold, and that's going on in this dynamic too, right? It's kind of that sort of situation. But so if we put all that aside, what we're really seeing, I think, psychologically is an affair. I mean, like she's having an affair on her husband, and she a lot of her reaction is something someone might do: denial, you know, kind of like trying to suggest that, trying to destroy the credibility of anyone who's kind of found her when she's discovered by the sister, all these kind of things. So I mean, it's like, I think there are some things that are really, I don't know if universal is the right word, but like relatable, maybe. Like if you haven't been in that position yourself, it's pretty easy to imagine yourself in those situations. The thing that is really hard to relate to is just what a, you know, kind of unforgivable premise this is when you actually look at all the, you know, that it's her stepson, that he's the age that he is, etc. But okay, I've seen some other hands up, but Meek, I think you were physically raising your hand, and I want to hear from you. Just unmute your there you
Yeah,
go.
can anybody hear me?
Yes, great, thank
Okay.
you.
I'm not taking anything away from everything being said, but what also struck me in the film was the issue of class. Look at her. Her sister's a hairdresser, okay? And she made it being a lawyer and then getting married, albeit that this is this guy's second wife, in absolute opulence. That villa that they had outside of Paris. She's driving an extraordinary car. She takes her daughters to horseback riding. They have a chalet in the mountains where the father sort of takes the son and they have a discussion. The opulence. And then she can lose everything by going right back to where her sister is. Of course, she's a lawyer. And what I really, in the scene for me, when she's on the staircase and she denies everything, you could just see the lawyer in her, you know, at court. She was used to it. That's her job. And the way she turned everything around, it was just extraordinary. So I don't have much sympathy for her as a woman, but I did see an issue of class.
Yeah, these factors you're pointing out, and that's great. I
Absolutely.
mean, I think it's worth saying it's true in American movies, but I don't think we're as conscious of it. But like in almost every French film, class is like a thing in the room. It's one of the elements that we really should be considering. And you're right to pick up. The sister's a reminder, I think, of kind of like where she comes from.
Where she comes from. And it seems to me in the American movies, they usually have beautiful settings. They're on a beach, people are rich. There, it had the class issue, you know.
American movies like to pretend like it's not a thing, like that. This is kind of aspirational lifestyles a lot, or else these kind of grungy indie movies, which are more conscious of it. But you're right. And I think, I hope you'll join us next month. I hope you all will. There are some really interesting class elements to the François Ozon movie that are kind of revealed as that onion kind of is peeled. Maureen, you're one of our familiar people. Thank you for your patience. You could tell you were next in line with your hand raised, but I wanted to make sure that we hadn't missed a couple people who hadn't.
Yeah, of course, of course. Let me lower my hand now. I have to confess, I saw the movie twice. The first time was just to see if I liked it or not, and it would hold my interest, which it did. The second time I watched it, it was the first 10 minutes when she was interviewing this girl. How many drinks have you had? How many boys have you dated? Whatever. And her one line made a clear impression on me. The accused is always the victim. And I think in her mind, she saw herself as the victim. This is how complicated a person she was, that she actually, in order, it's called self-preservation.
Yeah.
She made herself the victim. And she was so, I mean, at one point, I almost feel like she realizes what she did was wrong. One little scene which really struck a chord, which I didn't pick up, which helped me the second time. She's reading a bedtime story to her girls about this prince, this 16-year-old prince who comes in all dressed up in fine. And it's almost when she said that, she stopped her storytelling. It's like she had a flash of, oh my gosh. And then, and then she kind of, I mean, she goes into this other personality was like, okay, I've gone to the next step. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and I've watched like all these datelines of forensic, and even on the news, I watch body language. And when her Pierre confronted her with with what Theo had said to her, if it were me, my first reaction was, what the hell? Where is this all coming from? I would be incensed. And she's sitting there like a doe in headlights, thinking of what she's going to say. Her mind is already working. Okay, and she's really clever. She's so good at it that she was convincing. But I have to tell you, I have, I just saw her whole body language up until the end. At the end when she is there with Theo, with his attorney, and she's there very calm, and she actually said that about being calm when you're being accused of something, and at the beginning, and she was calm rather than feeling indignant and shocked that anybody would even consider this. She was almost too calm. I mean, she just sat there placidly and she says, "Oh, I'm going to deny everything." My impression of the ending, if I were to give my if the movie had been another half hour longer, I don't think this lawyer liked her very much, because he had his doubts. It's almost like he was leaning towards protecting Theo, and it was, to me, it was very questionable. I just didn't get the feeling that the lawyer was very impressed by her presence when they were side by side. This was and I know we're all going to have to come to our own conclusions, but she had zero sympathy for me. She was, I considered her very very twisted and very scary, that she could be so manipulative. And also, the last thing I want to say about the sisterhood is that her sister came from a broken marriage, and she had issues when I think it was sort of like kind of in the beginning. Her sister was a manicurist, and the husband comes and drops off the son, and I think the sister was really realized the outcome of breaking up the family. So was my own opinion is that she knew what her sister had done and had done wrong, but she wasn't going to be the one to break up her family, and to see her have to deal with the struggle of raising children alone like she did. So that's my take.
Yeah, those are some really great thoughts. I'm going to keep my comments there to a minimum because I want other people to be able to weigh in before we run out of time, other than saying I love your analysis of the self-preservation aspect. And I think that we're basically seeing her lawyering early on, and we see her shift into really savvy lawyer mode when the tables are turned. John, you've been very patient. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, thanks. I see the film partly as a power play between the two protagonists. The young Theo is the driving force early on. He's the more powerful. She is submitting to him. He has the youth, he has the energy, he has the animalism. He's very forceful on a repeated basis, and she gives in to him. And yes, you could say, yeah, she should have been a lot more circumspect, but she just found herself whether unable or willing to succumb. And then later in the film, it reverts and she becomes powerful. She wants to save the situation. And you know, on one hand, you have his youth, and on her hand, yes, she's an adult, but she's like strict logic. She's Mr. Spock. She knows exactly how to handle this situation. She knows the legal aspects. She is absolutely strict. She is didactic. And so suddenly he's powerless. And you see him pushed into a position where
She's like fighting back. That would seem to be almost like this kind of feminist thing that Breya is depicting. Go ahead.
there was a good mention about that in his physical reaction when he's being told that he's the liar. And Maureen made a good point about it when she was describing ways in which our female is driving the situation. But I felt that the end was ambiguous, because I felt at the end she was losing again. And I'm not saying that he was winning. They were both winning and losing at the same time, because she had given herself the opportunity maybe to walk away, to convince everyone that that he was the one at fault, that he was lying. And now she's allowed herself right back into that very situation that she was trying to get herself out of. So I think, as compared to that other film that was referenced before, this one had a deliberately ambiguous ending. And again, it was a situation where it was the young or the old, you know, the perpetrator or whatever. I think that at the end, it's like, again, we're back to the beginning of the story. She's in trouble. He's a troublemaker, but they're both in that funny mode. There's a lot they both want. And in a way, they both win and they both lose.
Thanks. That there's like this has sparked. We've had some really great discussions in recent movies, and I love just how thoughtful and all the facets to what you guys are going to have been bringing up. I'd like to hear from Jocelyn, and I'm going to propose this because Cecile sort of started us off by pointing out the ending. We might end up having to go just a little bit over. Some of you haven't seen the ending or might not have the time, but like, so Jocelyn, I'd like to hear your thoughts, and then we can spend a couple extra minutes maybe unpacking the ending specifically, with maybe Cecile leading that. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
Probably because I'm just now embarking on reading The Feminine Mystique.
Those are really cool glasses, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was looking for green to match my outfit. Anyway, you know, all of us want to find a good guy and a bad guy. And I guess I just don't agree that there's a good guy or a bad guy in this film. Everyone is
Catherine Breillat quite
right,
clear.
exactly. Everyone is complicit, and we become complicit because each of us enters into relationships as damaged human beings. That is just who and what we are. And you know, my father, he's dead, I can say this, he got molested by a church janitor. I mean, each one of us carries some small damage from somewhere. And I do believe, you know, no author, no filmmaker puts scenes in for no reason. So those mentions of the friend of her mother's who she loved, that abortion, the fact that she mentions to the young man how lonely she is. She feels she has no friends. She's, despite the brave face, the power, the shine that she carries, her accomplishments, her achievement of some kind of lifestyle, she's made that decision with a certain amount of collateral having been taken, and she's not going to make healthy decisions. He isn't. The husband isn't.
right?
I mean, I think you are like, you have hit the arrow in the bullseye of what I think Catherine Breillat, I mean, she obviously has lots of things, but one of the things that I think she's really committed to depicting, which is that, you know, sexuality is like this force that, you know, kind of affects all of us differently at different times, all these kind of things. It has to be acknowledged. And it often manifests itself in messy and, you know, kind of like regrettable ways. And, you know, it's like you see this situation where like something that shouldn't have happened in the first place becoming a kind of quicksand. And I think, I mean, you guys have all kind of like brought up interesting things. Like I think it was Leslie, the college teacher, brought up early on, you know, it's like consent, and yet like, how do you deal with people whose kink or whose fetish is the opposite of that? They don't have the tools to express what they want, and they kind of want to be pressured into something, or people who have rape fantasies or all these kind of things. I mean, all of this is like, there's just a million ways that human sexuality
normal. It's normal outgrowth of normal living, even though it's not normal. Right?
Which I think what you're saying is that, like, you know, it's to be expected that, you know, that it can kind of like take all of these, you know, really interesting and sometimes damaging or damaged forms. And like, and I think Breillat has looked at that in so many interesting ways throughout her career. I think this is, you know, arguably her most mature film. And I'm so, you know, delighted that it's come around to this. Cecile, would you like to, I don't know if you wanted to pick up on the ending or if you had another thought, but it's your turn. Thank you, Jocelyn, for that. You're muted, Cecile, just
Sorry about that. Well, like you, I'm just really amazed with all of the great comments that everyone's brought up. But I'm surprised that no one said anything about, I mean, you know, you talked about the class differences and how the sister at one point had said to her, "I'm jealous of you." I don't know if you remember that scene, but she did say that to her. And then when she destroyed the recordings that the young man had made, you know, she seemed to feel comfortable about this, but I had in the back of my mind that her sister, I was sure that her sister was going to tell on her because she had tried to reach her husband once. But
it
he
seems to
didn't.
me, my reading on the sister, and it goes to things that have come up in this conversation, like maybe even help me form this opinion, but it's like, I do think class is at the heart of it. I think in some ways Leah Drucker's character, I don't know why I keep forgetting the character's name, but like the main lawyer, one, like, you know, if they came from a lower class background, and in a way, in a kind of like, you know, I don't think she feels very loyal toward the new husband. The new husband is the door through which her sister stepped into a better lifestyle. And so the choice is, do I continue to be loyal to my sister, or do I do the kind of humane thing and you know, interfere in this situation that really should not be happening, at the risk of it kind of like any progress that our family has made is set back if it all falls apart. In other words, the sister vicariously has something to lose as well, is kind of the way that I read that. Do we want to take just a minute to, we're kind of going over, but like with the ending, I've got some thoughts. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in there, but it is, to Sharif's point, it is different. It is radically different from what we see in the Danish film. I'll leave it to you guys to discover by Google or by watching what happens there. I just don't want to spoil it for those who don't want it ruined. But I think what's happening is we are seeing again just the power that this entire situation has over this woman, and that it's kind of competing with this kind of unstable equilibrium that she's reestablished, you know, kind of like casting the young man as the victim at great psychological cost to him. He re-enters, and not only is she kind of like unable to resist him, but doesn't it seem like there's a self-destructive, self-punishing aspect of the way that, like, you know, it goes back to another point that came up earlier of the nearly being caught. Like I watched that scene and I'm like, I can't believe she's caving in again. She's kind of like emerged from the situation, but also how is she not going to be discovered? And how, when she gets back into bed, does he not smell what happened on her or whatever? You know, it's like but I think that's part of, like, you know, sometimes it's a turn on for people. Sometimes it's, if you know you're doing something wrong, you're kind of inviting that, like, the world is going to enforce, like, you know, discover the affair or whatever it is. And like, I mean, like, there's just so much going on in that scene that I think what she's done is she's taken what is a moral ending to the Danish movie and she's turned it into this thing that, like, is so ambiguous, but reopens the wound. You know, it's like nothing has been resolved, and we are kind of like thrown back into the kind of like the deepest end of, you know, narratives, kind of like you dig yourself into a hole and have to kind of like climb out of it. It's almost like she pushes Leah Drucker back into that hole, and when she climbs into bed, it's as unresolved an ending as I think The Graduate, you know, when like Dustin Hoffman and Catherine Ross drive off and you're like, this is a 2-week relationship. It is not a happy ending. You know, it's so that's my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone wants to cap on that or if we should leave it there. Sharif, do you want to say something quickly?
You reminded me with your comment about what a critic once wrote about one of her movies, L'abus de faiblesse.
One of Catherine Breillat's movie, yeah.
With Isabelle Hubert. He said that her women are often mysteries to themselves. So Anne here is a mystery to herself, I think. She doesn't even realize or grasp what she wants.
Yeah, people are allowed to be complex and contradictory. I think it's something that in movie characters we don't get very often because it's hard to interpret sometimes. But in reality, we're constantly self-defeating or like acting against. We might have very high standards. We might be a lawyer who acts on behalf of, you know, young people who in our life somehow find ourselves in the, you know, the most compromising position. The movie you mentioned, Abuse of Weakness, is Breillat's previous film to this. She made it 10 years earlier in 2013. It's her autobiographical film, and it explains both kind of, she suffered a stroke or a hemorrhage of some kind in her brain, and it looked like that might be the end of her career. She kind of herself surmounted that, made that film, and now has made this film. But this is, you know, an extraordinary woman who's like, you know, a fighter herself, the filmmaker I'm talking about. And she clearly was put on this earth to present us with female characters who are as dimensional as real people. So I'm so delighted. I hope you guys are too, by just how thoughtful this conversation was. I thought I had a handle on this movie, and I have like gone so much deeper just from what you had to bring to the conversation. So thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you last Monday of September for François Ozon's movie. So hope you can join us then.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And a special thanks, as always, to Melissa Sara, Renee Ketchum, Isabelle Leroux with the Alliance Française. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and for such a fascinating conversation about last summer. I've just put a link to, well, earlier I put a link in the chat to all of Breillat's films that are currently streaming in the US. You can find them all on Telescope. And I've also just put a link to When Fall is Coming, the Ozone movie that we'll be talking about next month, another film about all kinds of moral ambiguity. We will see you back here next month on September 22nd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank
Merci.
you.
Au revoir.
Bye.